right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the very first video in the Stormie Grace's YouTube Academy here on YouTube, which we're so excited that the Kickstarter got to fund. And oh my gosh, classes are going to be starting March 22nd. So we're just a few weeks away from that. So it's a very exciting time. We're kicking off a new year, SJ, new astrological year, and a new little academy. And yeah, it's going to be a lot, right?
Super exciting. Wow, I'm so excited for all the students and for just the teaching that's going to happen and the learning. So yeah, it's wonderful. It's just so wonderful. And the timing of the astrological new year is very symbolically important. And what a way to kick off that year, like you're saying, with this school, this launch of the academy. So
Yeah, it's wild. And so today, of course, we have S.J. Anderson, who has been a part of the Eat and Greets, but now is just like, I don't know, I just love being in your vibe. I love having you here. I love the way you teach and you give and you share astrology. So welcome back, first of all.
thank you, and welcome to everyone. And thanks for having me back. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, and we're going to actually start off with some pre-basic astrology teaching in terms of, in this video, we're going to show you guys the chart of the Stormie Grace YouTube Academy. We're going to show you how we came to choose this chart via the pathway of electional astrology. And then we're going to show you who this academy is, what it's made of. And it's really neat to see it, because I always tell people, align your business with its own birth chart. And so we're not going to do anything different here. We're aligning this academy with who and what it is, and we're going to let it function that way and work on the challenges that it has and all of the stuff. So we're going to show you today the two different charts that we were thinking about in our election, and then we'll show you the one that we chose and do a little exploration of who this particular university or academy is. Okay. All right, good. So, and SJ actually created the election.
I was honored to share some thoughts and share some ideas on it, and it was a really fun project to do. It was a nice way to be a part of the launch, just to contribute more as the funding phase was going, to add some value with some of my just efforts, astrological efforts. So yeah, it was wonderful to see, and there's some really interesting things in the chart. I think it will be a great teaching lesson to show everybody the choices that we made and what those options were. So.
Yeah, awesome. Well, should we get into it? You ready?
Yeah, I am absolutely ready. Let's go. I'm gonna share my screen, and I've got this little PPT, as is always so useful when teaching. So yeah, should I just kind of jump in and start sharing this, Stormy? Okay,
Yeah,
wonderful.
Let's do it.
Okay, sweet. So this is just to give everybody a little bit of background. Electional astrology is one of the main branches of astrology. There's four. Natal, electional, mundane astrology, which is the astrology of events of the world, and then horary, where you ask a question and get an answer. It's more of like a divination. But electional astrology is choosing a time to initiate an action. So this academy will begin this year, and so we've chosen that time to start the academy and launch it. And just to say here, the first point, it's got a lot of variety. There's a long history with electional astrology. Every astrological tradition has its own rules and its own style and its own things that it prioritizes. So this is, and I'm sure there will be some teachers in the school, Stormy, teaching electional astrology. I hope. Is that true? Will there be someone maybe teaching some basics there?
Yes, we are hoping to slide that in a little bit more towards the end of the year in our specials section, because there is a specials section. So you kind of get a taste of some other things.
Perfect. Yeah. And that's a good point, I think, to say it's not in terms of a foundation or the basics. This is certainly maybe a more intermediate or advanced style of practice. So but there it is, and so we're finding the most appropriate time for an event. Okay, let's see here. The next thing I want to say is that maybe the most important question of all is, what are we electing for? That kind of drives everything about an election. And so, for example, if we've got a wedding, we want a strong Venus. If we have a business, a strong Mercury or Jupiter. And for this particular election, an astrology academy, you really want to find Mercury strong. You really want to try to get Mercury strong in the chart. And you'll see at the end here, that was a big reason why the ascendant that I elected and that Stormie helped, as we talked about the options, this was one of the big considerations, was trying to get Mercury powerful. I want to show this next slide, and this comes to what we had already talked about here. What better time to start a school for a year of astrology education than on this astrological new year? And you can see here this article from tarot.com. People have been writing about this. I want to point out that AFAN, one of our big organizations, in 1993, they're the ones who, I guess, created International Astrology Day, first asserted by AFAN. This is from Wikipedia. And that's so it's both the astrological new year, but it's this International Astrology Day. You know how, Stormie, every day is a day of International Day of something, right?
Yeah.
Pancakes or, spiders. This is International Astrology Day. So it's a big celebration on the 20th when the sun enters Aries.
Which is so phenomenal too, that this is the article you're using, because Maria Di Simone is one of our teachers.
Okay, wow, wonderful.
Yeah.
I look forward to seeing her and getting to know more of her. Yeah, this is amazing. I just pulled this up, and I know tarot.com has a lot of astrology articles as well. Yeah, this is a recent article. So cool. Maria Di Simone, wonderful. What kind of astrology does she practice, Steve?
I don't know what her specialty is, but I know that she'll be coming in to talk and teach to us about transits. We'll actually be doing that one together. So it's going to be a good session.
Excellent. So your transits with Stormie and Maria, wonderful. So just to say, with the election, we're now at this pocket of energy. Sometimes in elections, there is these, you might call them mundane, maybe that's not the best word, but just other factors that supersede or that kind of force us into choosing within a range. And because this is such a strong symbolic beginning moment, that it kind of puts the choices right around this astrological new year for the launch. And that's another principle that people can understand or use. A client may come to you and say, I want to get married in March, the first 2 weekends. Those are my options. And you really have to pick between two options. It sometimes makes the job easier. And of course, you could have started in July, but why would you do that with this very strong symbolic beginning? It's just the perfect time. So I'm really happy to see how this has unfolded. Stormie, I wanted to ask you, do you think this will run then into astrological new year 2022? Is that the plan for the Academy, or how is that?
Yes. So the plan is actually, we will go through and we will end out, officially wrap up just a day before the astrological new year next year, but we'll also be getting ready in case we decide to keep the Academy going. So it's kind of it's the circle of life over here. But yep, we will get the entire 12 months in, and there's just so much symbolism, like you said, around it, and how it even came to be that it's like keeping in tone and in time with that. I definitely wanted to keep that.
Cool. Yeah, and I like that because I really feel like around that Aries ingress, it does feel like a new year. We were just talking a little bit about March is coming and this new energy coming in. But I sort of like how astrologers, sometimes we operate on our own calendar a little bit. And as I've gotten deeper in my astrological practice, I definitely feel Christmas and New Year's, it sort of took the edge off, or kind of turned that way down for me as the beginning. And this is really what I feel like can be the beginning of the year. So
Yeah.
very lovely. Okay, so let me jump down here. This is some of the other important considerations with electional astrology. I'm not going to go too much into these. I just want to cover these for folks. These are my top questions, okay? Is the moon safe from Mars and Saturn and the lunar nodes potentially? Is the moon's ruler in good condition? What planets is the moon applying to and separating from? And then are the ascendant and its ruler safe from harm? And people might not understand fully what these mean, but that's okay, because there's videos on YouTube you can watch to understand this a little bit more. Stormie and I did an eat and greet earlier, I guess just last month, but you can find that on Stormie's channel. I'm subscribed. You should subscribe too. You can see that there. And then I have a video on my channel, Notes on Electional Astrology. You can just type that in with my name, S.J. Anderson. You can get my video. It covers a lot of the same ground. But if you want to learn more about what I just showed you, go there. I don't think I'm going to cover much of that here. We'll kind of move fast and kind of high level, but
Awesome.
okay. So let's move here. This is the Aries ingress. I wanted to start here. So this is the moment the sun moves into Aries, March 20th, 2021, Colorado Springs, about 3:38 in the morning there on the 20th. So this is actually the moment that the it's like our New Year's Eve. You know, we'd be singing with Odd Long Song, the old English. You know, this is where we would be singing it right at this moment. And and this is whole sign. I want to just show everybody and show you, Stormie. I do have Placidus here for at the last slide, but I can also pull all this up and Placidus as we go and as needed. Is this going to be okay?
I think this is good.
Okay. So, I mean, what do you see here? The main thing I looked at right away was that I look right to the moon always, just to get myself situated in any astrological moment. Where is the moon and what's it doing? And we've got the moon here in Gemini with the North Node close here, and then with Mars. So this is called co-presence in the Hellenistic tradition. And in terms of orb, this can be important for electional astrology too. How close is the moon to planets, to aspects with planets, and is it applying or separating? Those are all important considerations. And so here the moon is separating from the conjunction to the North Node and its conjunction to Mars. So maybe we like that. It's better than if it was closely applying, right? Mm-hmm. The moon is moving away from maybe a difficult conjunction here to these 2 points. But it's still co-present. The other thing is the ruler of the moon, Mercury, and this is going to be a big deal for this election. Mercury is in Pisces, and we call this Mercury sign of fall or exile or detriment. And so because we're capturing this astrological New Year energy, Mercury, there's really no options here. We can't go back 3 weeks or move forward a month to get Mercury out of this condition it's in. And so we'll have to solve this Mercury problem, this difficult Mercury, and we'll show everybody how we do that. But that's the big thing about this chart. The last thing I want to say, the moon is waxing, which is also very important for when you're starting something. And I love that there's a waxing moon in this astrological new year to begin this academy. I think it's very auspicious for growth and for the students' growth and for their learning of astrology and increasing their knowledge.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's really kind of a beautiful thing to see how it all is laying and shaping out. Just even as we were, talking and saying, okay, well, let's look at this date and let's look at this date and see what we're even getting a sense of. And it was nice too, because in creating it, it's not just about launching something on my end. It's where is everybody going to get to be present in this energy, or what do we get to offer out under this energy? So it's beautiful.
Yeah. And that's one of the things, when you first told me about your vision, how powerful is the vision? I mean, astrology freely available to the whole world. I mean, that's just it. There's a weight there that just feels very, very important. So wonderful. So let me move to the next slide. So there's this question of the moon's application. This is what I was just referring to earlier. And the thing about, so there's really two choices here, Gemini moon, or do you wait for the Cancer moon? And we'll talk about the pros and cons of both. But during this Gemini moon, one of the most powerful things about it is that you get this application of the moon to Venus. So in this is not the Aries ingress. This is the next day. And this is about a day later. The moon will have moved through Gemini and then be here in late Gemini. And it makes this an application to Venus. Right around, this is a chart for 6:04 a.m. I think the chart that you had, it was a little bit, maybe 4 minutes before this, but I put this one up just because this is the final minute before the moon completes that square to Venus. And just as a general point of order or a rule, electional astrologers love when the moon is applying to Venus or Jupiter. It's one of like the highlights of an electional chart if you can find one. It's like, we just love it. So there's the real strength with this chart in terms of getting that very closely applying moon to Venus. And when I saw this, I thought, wonderful. The other thing about this is you have the ascendant right with Mercury here. which we talked earlier about Mercury's condition. This is how you mitigate a difficult planet in an electional chart. You put it with the ascendant or with the midheaven. And that way it gets the power of the angles to kind of raise it up from whatever it's suffering from. It's a protective and a kind of an activator of that planet. So the one other thing about the chart here, so this late degree moon, sometimes you see, so anaretic degree is a principle in the modern astrological tradition, that the moon in those final degrees, maybe there's a challenge or it's like the end of the energy. In the older text, the electional astrologers talk about the malefic terms. And those are, you can see in this chart, Venus is ruled by Saturn by the Egyptian term, and the moon is ruled by Saturn. So that's one of maybe the downsides of this chart. That's one. But in every electoral chart, there's always pros and cons. We're always having to weigh the pros and cons and pick amongst competing options and just decide this one had maybe more pros than cons. So what do you see here, Stormie? What's your take with this chart?
Yeah, with this one, the thing that I was thinking a lot about, like you were saying, was that Mercury with the ascendant. I'm like, oh, that is just beautiful. That is really very strong. And then I just happen to be pumped when Venus is involved, at all with anything. But the other thing that I was thinking about as I was looking at it, just energetically, I just had this sense as we were going through it. I was like, I don't know, man. I think we really have to let that degree pass. Like we need to let that moon just get past that degree. This is a beginning. We want like the fresh emotional nature, that fresh wind of something comforting and nourishing to come to the table. So as I was looking at it, that was a big portion of the consideration, but it's always challenging too, though, because when you do get a nice application, you're like, well, do I keep this or do I wait for this energetic moment over here? So this is why, where you were saying, like, sometimes it makes it easier when you just have a handful of days to choose from, but sometimes when you have a handful of hours to choose from, that actually makes it harder.
Yeah, that can be, I mean, the options get so, sometimes there's, like if we had to, let's say we couldn't get this Pisces rising, we had to deal with like a Aquarius rising. I mean, do you put the ascendant with Saturn, with Jupiter? Sometimes that can be a real challenge here.
Right.
And I love that idea too. If I wasn't even thinking about that in terms of just the new, when a planet moves into the first degrees or the early degrees of the next sign, it really is a new energy. There's just a newness there. And that's the choice here. So let's move on. Let me just move on here. Oh, I will mention one other thing. Venus is in exaltation in Pisces.
Yeah.
And that's also a kind of thing where you want to try to capture that. Oh, we can get Venus exalted. But we'll look, because the chart that I think we ultimately went with has some really cool things about Venus.
Yeah, thank goodness too, though, because it does become hard when you're just looking within like the hours of the days. That becomes more of a challenge. So it really is like an intuitive gut check to choose your election. At least it was for this one.
Yeah, I think it's nice to have rules, but ultimately you're playing with the unknown almost every election, because the planets are always in a new state. They never repeat in our lives. They're never going to be exactly the same. So we're always dealing with this intuitive model. And I think that's really important. I'm glad you mentioned that, because we can't get around that intuitive kind of choice, judgment as a technique for judgment, using that intuition. It's very important. And we get so technical with these rules that it's just great to hear that. So thank you very much. Yeah.
Well, it's that idea too, that like, I think that universally and energetically, the only reason that this academy is happening is because it was the will of the astrology community for it to be here in the first place. And so that means that this chart was going to have its own life, its own soul, its own mission, but also all of its own challenges. And those challenges were going to be specifically built for not only the facilitator, but the community to undergo as well. So trusting the intuition over the technique, I think, is so much about the lessons that are completely encapsulated in the chart that we chose.
Yeah, and it's just a great thing to if we take just kind of as a broader point about astrology here for a second, So, you know, life is real, life's dynamic, it's 4 or 5D. I mean, I'm looking at life around this room I'm in, and that kind of trumps everything, doesn't it? I mean, it trumps the chart, it trumps the astrology. And I love this idea of this kind of the will of, maybe I would call it a divine will, or the kind of force of life that has come in to cause this academy to come into form, and that has its own, I mean, we're ultimately just in service of that, you know. So uh,
Absolutely.
that's beautiful. Okay, so let me come down to this next thing. So this is the next slide I have here. Wait until the moon's in Cancer, and this is where I think both of us kind of like this idea of maybe waiting until the moon's in Cancer. The big thing about it, as a fundamental principle of electional astrology, the ruler of the moon is the ultimate outcome of an inception chart. And so I think this is why I really love the Cancer moon, is that it does not rely on a ruler anymore. It relies on its own power in
Right.
Cancer. Whereas before we were relying on the Mercury that is in this difficult condition, we were looking to mitigate that with this placement and kind of bring the Mercury into some safety. But this, I think, gives the ultimate outcome of the project a lot more strength, having the
Yeah.
moon in Cancer. And go ahead. Yeah.
I was just thinking, you know, this massive energetic influx I got as soon as we were like moving and going through the charts, is I was like, oh, if it just kind of felt like this exhalation of like giving, and we can see everything. We've moved into this southern hemisphere. It's like, okay, we're no longer in that foundational, you know, northern hemispheric kind of energy. Here we are moving to this southern hemisphere, and it's nicely splayed between east and west. So it is that, I thought immediately, this beautiful balance of energy that's like, yes, there's going to have to be a massive amount of effort put in, but also a massive amount of effort brought back. It's just like, you can obviously see that I was quite excited to see this chart on impact.
Oh, and that's great. I was just thinking about this later. I have a point here, but if you draw the horizon line, ascendant 1 degrees, descendant would be 1 degrees Capricorn. Everything's above the horizon, like you're
Everything.
mentioning. And that's so lovely for a project that, like we were talking about earlier, is for the whole world. It's going to be out into this whole world, front facing and engaged with the world. And you just love to see that.
Yeah.
I see that in nativities often. And I tell clients, you know, are you a public figure? Are you really out there in terms of your community and front facing and engaged with people? And that's a chart signature for this election that is so beautiful. And the moon will be rising shortly after that. You know, the moon is in the first house. It's not buried down here
Yeah.
in these awesome houses, don't get me wrong, but that are more interpersonal and more interior. The moon is here in the first house, getting ready to move up above the horizon too. So
Yeah. And the on this particular chart, the synastry is, you know, my Venus in Aries sits right on top of the Venus and the Sun of this chart.
awesome. Yeah, actually
Right
mine
at the
does too.
midheaven,
So
right at the midheaven. So I'm like, all right, I hear you, you know? Yeah.
excellent. Yeah. So I was going to say here, the first business day, this was another interesting thing. This is a Monday. And so if you just look at the astrological New Year timing, it's Saturday, then it's Sunday, and that's maybe weekends, people taking time off. Often with holidays, you know, that it's a celebration. You may not want to be working as astrologers. We want to be celebrating, and then
Right.
take that a hangover day for those drinkers out there. I'm a teetotaler, but those drinkers out there. So this would be that first business day after the holiday in that kind of natural order. And it's a Monday. It's also the first business day in our the world system that we live in. So I like that too. I felt that felt powerful.
Yeah. And Monday's the day of the moon. So we again have this Cancerian moon energy support all the way around on this chart, and and of the people, right? It's of the people.
Oh yeah. It's wow. So let me just jump. So this is the other thing I want to say. We lose the exalted Venus in Pisces, like we talked about in the moon's application, but Venus, and we'll just talk about it here, this condition where Venus moves within 1 degree. So we could have tried to elect maybe the moon in earlier degrees of Cancer. So on the 21st, later in that afternoon and evening, and this might be a good time to just show this off where I've got the animation up here with my solar fire. It will take just 1 second. So here it is. Can you see this okay?
Yes.
Okay, so this is the 20th. And if we just go back by the hours, you'll notice here that here's the first selection we were looking at. This is now in Placidus, right around 6. You can see here the moon applying to Venus. Actually, this is 2021 March. Okay, sorry, it's the next day. Excuse me. Let me just push that forward. You can see here the moon applying to Venus. But now if so, on this same day, if we were just to move through, you get the moon in early Cancer. But just notice, let's say we wanted to do this the day of this day, so the day before, you got the moon near the ascendant here in early Cancer. But look at Venus. Venus is still more than 1 degree away from its conjunction with the sun. And this comes from an astrologer, Rhetorius the Egyptian, an old Hellenistic astrologer. But his technique was that when the planet moves within 1 degree, it changes the nature of the planet. So instead of being combust here or under the sun's beams, which can be challenging for a planet, it can be a block. This actually starts supercharging the significations of that planet and really gives us access to a Venus and Aries energy in maybe its most auspicious form, once we get it within that border of 1 degree within its conjunction of the sun. And so that happens here right around, so that's why if we wait to the next day to get the moon later, we'll capture that. So it's right here about 2 a.m. on the 22nd, Venus crosses into that powerful condition of what we call in the heart of the sun.
Yeah. Yep. And we just needed to get a little bit away from that, just a little bit.
Yeah. So let me see here. Let me move. And just to say, with the exalted Venus that we had in that Gemini moon chart, now we get a Venus in the heart of the sun. Maybe not as good, but in some ways almost as powerful, because if you think about Venus's cycle with the sun, it's building towards this rebirth moment that happens actually when it's retrograde is when the rebirth happens. But this is still that it would be the full moon moment with the Venus and the sun. This is that full moon moment of Venus happening. And it happens in Aries. And so that's lovely. And you mentioned the 10th house. I mean, beauty, pleasure, hopes, joy, that we can maybe bring that, or that the Academy's purpose might be able to bring that to its students, the joy of astrology, the pleasure of the practice of astrology. That's one way to see this.
Yeah. We've also got the brilliance here of Venus hanging out with the energy of Jupiter. And look, the sun is aligned here with Venus as well. So it is this is all right. This one's all right.
Yeah, there's a lot to like. There's a whole lot to like. And let's keep going, because I think there's even more. It gets even better, in my opinion, in terms of the symbolic brilliance and just of the, and I feel like the universe just kind of offered this up. It's like, and this is how elections go. The universe just said, here it is. We just had to find it. And then it was like, oh, okay, yeah, this is exactly what we're being called toward as a collective, and the school is being called into this moment. Yeah. So it's beautiful. So let's just jump down the next slide. So if we just look at the applications of the moon in this context, I always do this when I elect. I make sure the moon is not applying to Mars or separating from Mars, applying to Saturn or separating from Saturn. I just don't want it carrying that light or moving into the light of those planets. So I always like to check, though, what is the moon applying to? What is it separating from? And in this case, the moon has made a trine to Mercury and is separating from that. It was about half a day before this. So it's carrying Mercury's light. And I love that that's the planet of astrology. And so we have a moon that's been infused by Mercury. And so there's that mercurial feature to the moon, but then it's applying to Neptune in Pisces. A trine to Neptune and Pisces. And I'm kind of pro Neptune as an auspicious planet. I know right now a lot of people say Neptune is a malefic. That's like a big hashtag you find on Twitter. But I really feel like the spiritual feature of Neptune, when it was discovered, it was around a time of great spiritualism and kind of spiritual awakening in the 19th century. And so I've always really loved that energy. And the modern ruler of Pisces is Neptune. And so we have a Neptune in its home there. If we go with that modern ruler, the moon will be applying to Neptune. So that feels important to me too, along the lines of what you were saying, Stormy, of like the collective. I think Neptune can be a planet of that collective spiritual energy.
Yeah.
And that we're capturing some of that here with the moon's application and separation from Mercury, application to Neptune.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about Neptune?
Yeah, I'm a pro Neptune. Well, I'm a pro all of our planets,
Yeah.
people, but
Yeah.
I'm definitely pro Neptune, and I do love the configuration of it over there in the ninth house, because really, a portion of this project has been very intangible. Right. It began out of a very Uranus in Taurus idea that popped in over here, but it was not completely tangible yet. And that has been the nature, even as we're going along and we're getting things set up, is having to bring them into a tangible nature. But it's very Mercury in Pisces as well. It's trying to look at details through water, but having to say, okay, forget the details. What's the creative picture of what we're trying to create? So it holds that. And it's also, at a ninth house expansive kind of level, at an educational level, it really is we haven't done this before. So we're about to find out what lives in between these worlds, but we're doing it with the appropriate intent, and we're doing it with transparency, right? A spiritual honesty that is available. So I really am for it. Very, very much so. So yeah, big
Oh,
fan.
yeah. And the water element that you mentioned, that, I love that water element for binding people. It brings us together. Water binds things. You always mix things in water. And so it feels important to have that component. To me, I mean, some people might prefer more of an intellectual or a cooler type of learning, but I think a lot of us do well when we have an emotional connection and a kind of warmth that water can bring to bind us to each other. And so I look forward to bringing that to the lessons I'm teaching, really trying to just connect with my students in this emotional way. And I feel that already just with how the launch went. There was a lot of community support, and just people were really activated with positive emotion around the idea that you brought to us. So I already feel that water component strongly with how it's gone so far.
I do too. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And one other thing to mention, by the way, in 2022, we will have towards the end of the school here, you will have a Jupiter conjunction on the midheaven. And that feels really important.
That
Transiting
feels
Jupiter.
really important. And we'll have a touch into it as early as May, between May and July. And that is really where the bulk of the school is like, whew. It's like, just as we're looking at the schedule here, we're like, wow, there is a lot of like detail kind of stuff going on right here as we're going through March and April. But we get into May and it's like, whoa, full application. We're bringing it to the table. So it becomes very expansive with even that touch into that Piscean energy, even though it's not going to be at 9 degrees. I believe in planetary ingress and retrograde. So, by the time we get to July, whatever needs to be fixed for the rest of the experience, we'll fix it during Jupiter's retrograde.
Yeah, and I'm certainly one too to believe, in the Hellenistic model, which is my specialty. You have what's called that co-presence I mentioned earlier. As soon as transiting Jupiter ingresses into Pisces, it becomes co-present with the natal midheaven of the school and the Mercury and Neptune, and that is in the ninth house of astrology and teaching. So it's a beautiful feature of this chart. Wow, that makes me feel good just to be able to share that to see that for the first time. I wasn't even thinking about that. So, okay, let's jump down. The next chart here. So the thing about this chart, if I always like to check where are Mars and Saturn, because you really want to know where they are, just so you can kind of understand what modality is the most functional potentially. And what we look for is hard aspects, at least I do in my electional work. So it's just the modes here are the fixed signs, have Saturn and Aquarius, and the mutable signs have both the lunar nodes and Mars. And so those may be kind of the challenging signs in terms of at least where we want to avoid where the moon being in those modes. And that's why we love the Cancer moon as well. But you also have the sun exalted in Aries,
Right.
in the 10th house. So these cardinal signs are really powerful here. And I think I don't want to sleep on this sun, exalted sun. I mean, that is also a very powerful planet. Both luminaries exalted, and I mean, both luminaries dignified by traditional essential dignity in these angular houses in the cardinal mode that is not having to deal with squares from Mars and Saturn. This sun is, the consciousness. This could be maybe, it's usually considered the individual consciousness, but I do think there's something about the collective nature of our reality in the sun. The sun feeds us as a whole. It's what the whole of the earth depends on. That feels very powerful to me too. And Chiron being with it, I always find that astrology is at its best a healing practice, and the light of the sun can be very healing as well. To get into that sun, to heal our bodies, to give our bodies the production of vitamin D depends on the sun. But I think this Chiron on the 10th can be, I know when I'm just trying to bring a healing energy with what I teach. Ultimately is the goal. I use astrology to heal. What do you think about the Chiron here and the sun?
Yeah.
And did you think about that, or did you?
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I did. And one of the things I was thinking is truly with Chiron and the sun being there together, one of the things I tend to focus on in Chiron is that, really kind of understanding what the wound is so that we can understand how to get the medicine, how to distribute that. And Chiron in Aries, and that is like the question, the wound of the identity. What is it? What am I? What am I doing? What am I built for? And literally that is the essence of this project that says, here's this great idea, never been done out there before. So really, what am I? And the way that I'm going to find out what I am, sits very nicely in that sextile with Mars, that ruling energy of Chiron, anyways, in the 12th house. I am spiritual in nature. And then in those Gemini qualities, I am a spiritual communicator in nature. It's literally like this academy has said, it is in my healing nature. It is in my ego and my identity to share and to bring knowledge from the past or knowledge that's been hidden forward, so that is something I very much so saw and focused in on, because I thought, oh, when the planets have sex, that's good for us, right? Because it's usually a pocket of opportunity, but then we intelligently take action on it. So by taking action, by walking and stepping forward, the academy gets to figure out exactly what it is. Right? By giving of that nature of giving and sharing will actually build the identity. But it's really kind of like, it's got to be done in order to be understood, is kind of the perspective that I took it from. And then I also, just in alignment with that, looking at that square though, between the node and the midheaven, it's slow. Like the communication is slow. It's a little hindered. We wanted to have everything out 3 weeks ago, but it was like, oh, we don't have the pieces for that. We can't quite see what the information is yet. So it's very like, even without looking at this chart, just the feel of who and what the academy's identity is and what it's attempting to do is laid out beautifully here, just beautifully.
Wonderful. And I love that Neptune. So if we use the alphabet, the 12-letter alphabet, you do have this Neptune 12th house connection here.
Yeah.
And the ruler of the 10th being Mars, being in the 12th. This does bring this 12th house Piscean Neptune energy. There's two ways to handle that. To get to that symbolism in this chart. And that feels, I love that. The 12th house as a when I, as a chironic, it's really chironic in a way, isn't it? That we're trying to extend out to everybody and heal and bring that healing to the collective as just a key word that I always love with the 12th house. When people say, does that mean I'm going to be in a crisis? I say, well, why don't we lean into that and turn it to what can we heal? What can we engage in? What problems can we choose to engage in and solve? as a way to get ahead of that symbolism. So
Yeah.
to me, it fits with astrology, just being a beautiful way to do it. That's why part of why I fell in love with it was seeing how it can solve my personal problem, my individual knots. Astrology helped untie those a little bit and give me some answers.
Yeah,
So I think
absolutely.
that's part of it too.
And it's funny because, like, it was literally a pop into my head, very Uranian idea. And what I know and my experience of that is that it's like a flash of genius. And you don't always have all of the pieces put together, but having that mercurial energy over there as well. And like you said, getting the support from Mars, you can see it. It's like, okay, wait, what is that? And there have been so many moments between all of us where we've had to just step back and go, wait a minute, we don't have the clarity of the pieces. So we have to like baby step it forward, which I think is a full activation of that square, but you can lean into it instead of saying, oh, we have to have this like this, and this has to be like this. It is needed to be a slower version of a very active Mars. Like the information has come slower, and when it does, then we have to have more discussion, but then it gets there. So it's been interesting to live the energy of this chart because it's not like, I don't know, for me anyways, on this side, since I launched it is not the way I would have launched anything. I am far too practical for this.
It's interesting too that the eclipse season coming in May and June, late May and the first 2 weeks of June, you'll have this Mars will be activated.
Yeah.
And to see how just that energy as the project gets going and gets up, lessons every week, just how, eclipse is fated, accelerated fate. So I think there'll be a chance to step into some of the fated purpose of the school will kind of rise into its power there during the eclipses. That's great. And the point of electional astrology is to say there was no way around this Mercury Mars square. I mean, it's there, it's right here in the Aries ingress, where this is built into the moment, and there's nothing we could have done. Getting the midheaven with Mercury was the answer here, in my view, to mitigate a lot of the challenges with Mercury being squaring the nodes and Mercury squaring Mars, the opportunities, let's say, because there are opportunities. You've heard this probably, Stormie, that the hard aspects really are where we can grow, and without them, it's like our opportunity to step into our power fully and deploy the skills that we have latent in us fully to overcome the challenge. So, just looking at that, these are where the opportunities lie. How will we bring astrology? The school will bring astrology to the world. Maybe with this collective energy, that can sometimes be a challenge, but you'll have to, you'll grow through that, learning how to deal with the Neptune and fully come into the power of Mercury through a Neptune, and then learning about this Mars, like you said, Mercury square, and just how we can do the Mars, do a good,
Yeah. How are we going to get
be
this
strong.
done?
So yeah.
Yeah.
So okay. Let me go in here. So this is where I thought when I was thinking about this degree. So let's just show everybody here. 15. So it's Cancer 16 or 15 degrees of Cancer. That's where the moon is. And this is one of the most loaded degrees in the zodiac, with symbolism that goes all the way back to the beginning of the astrological tradition. So first, I'll just say that Jupiter's exaltation degree, this is the astrologydictionary.com. They have lovely write-ups on various astrological words or ideas, but they just say here, and you can find it in the Hellenistic sources. I didn't pull those sources. I just pulled this dictionary for purposes of efficiency. But the exaltation degree of Jupiter, our planet of expansion and wisdom and teaching, and money and all the good stuff, abundance, that is the 15th degree of Cancer. So there's something here about this degree that represents, in the earliest tradition, the benefic, the greater benefic Jupiter, and the powerful greater benefic Jupiter. I think we'll understand that more when we see that also the same degree in the Thema Mundi is the ascendant. In the Thema Mundi, the ascending degree is 15 degrees Cancer, and the moon's placement in the Thema Mundi is 15 degrees Cancer. That is where the moon is in this chart for the Academy. And just a quick bit of background on the Thema Mundi. It was an ancient teaching tool for astrologers. It's actually like the first piece of astrology education was the Thema Mundi. Firmicus Maternus says that it was developed by divine wise men of old, invented the Thema Mundi, the birth chart of the universe, so that it would be an example for astrologers to follow in the charts of men. So this is it. I mean, we're tied to the foundation teaching tool of the whole tradition. And this is when I saw this, it was just, I was like, wow, this is so, it feels like there's a direct lineage now flowing down in through this moment into this academy.
Which is interesting too, because it's back to that intuition versus technique as well, you know, to look at the 21st and to say, that's good. I mean, I see it, but that's not the right one. And then to look at this one and say, I got it. This is the chart. Now let's get into it and see why this is the chart. You know, and it's that connection to what it's in alignment with. The magic.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I've getting chills here with this. And
yeah, me too. I've got goosebumps.
Yeah,
really cool.
It's just, yeah, it's really beautiful. I mean, we're astrologers. We're teaching. We're involved in astrology education, and to be so tied to this is just so profound to the foundation of the tradition. I feel just honored, honestly, and taken aback, and I just feel small in a way, but then also large. That these symbols would want to speak through us and through this moment in time. It just feels humbling, really, to be involved. So thank you again for everything you've done and for bringing us to this point, and thanks to the community for rallying around this, because it's a beautiful thing to see. And the next thing, I just want to bring Firmicus in here. This is actually his book, Ancient Astrology. This is the Brahm translation. You can find it online. And here he says that, Asclepius, that's the healer, the most powerful Mercury, entrusted the secret of the Thema Mundi. So we again have this connection to Mercury, the planet of astrology, the planet of astrologers. And then it goes through here. He lists the degrees. You can just see here the moon, the 15th degree of Cancer. And this is the drawing from Brahms' text. There's that moon. He doesn't have the degree listed, but you come down here, the ascendant is in the 15th degree of Cancer. So you can just see it right here in the texts, those that were curious. And then let me just come down. And this is something that might come up in the school, depending on the teachers. This is how we get the rulership scheme for students out there that are curious. The Thema Mundi is very important for the foundations of why planets rule signs. And we'll leave that for another lesson, but just an example of how fundamental it is and what it was teaching. And it's important for aspects. The foundation of aspect theory comes from the Thema Mundi. So, okay, so I'm going to move on here to this Sirius conjunction. Did you want to say anything else?
Nope, we're good.
Okay. This is the other thing, that 15 degrees Aquarius. So the fixed stars moves through precession about 71 degree every 72 years. And it just so happens that in 2021, Sirius, the fixed star Sirius, it's in the 15th degree Cancer, or very close. I think it's like I don't have the exact date memorized. It could be either in the late 14 degrees or the late 15 degrees. And I didn't get that. I just know it's right around 15 degrees. Our moon here is going to be very clocely conjoined Sirius in terms of the projected ecliptic position of the fixed star Sirius. So we project its position onto the ecliptic using ecliptical geometry. And that's important because some people use fixed stars. They're using the mundio aspects, the parons, but this is the projected ecliptic degree position of the star. This is important just because ancient Egypt. So this takes us back to one of the branches of the astrology we've inherited flows through Egypt, and it was developed in Egypt. And to them, this star was the foundation of their calendar. And it was the most important star for everything they did in terms of dividing the time and their calendar. And I think about astrology as a way of mapping time. You know, it's our calendar in a way, like we talked about at the beginning. This flows nicely with the astrological new year. We're actually using that Aries ingress for our own calendar for our craft, you know. So this is just another aspect of it. It's not to me as potent as the thema mundi, but it is another way that ties us to Sirius. It ties us to the calendrics of the ancient Egyptians and their astrology. And then this is Vivian Robeson, the great fixed star astrologer, British fixed star astrologer. He talks about it being connected to Thoth. That's also a Mercury energy, the intermediary between the gods. Thoth was a god that gave language to humanity, according to that myth, just much like Mercury. And so it brings us into this realm of this kind of communication with the gods, this sort of mysterious energy of teaching and of dividing time. So it was another fixed star conjunction I just thought was auspicious to see. And yeah, and there's actually this Mars Aldebaran is also in the chart. So I think this could probably help with the Mars in the 12th we were just talking about. This is that royal fixed star Aldebaran. And that connects us to something, I think, a tradition there with that royalty, or, you know, one of the maybe 4 best stars, and that we can kind of leave that for maybe another exploration. But so those are the 2 fixed stars that I'd seen, and they're within 1 degree. It's not 2 degrees. It's within that, even within that 1 degree. So
yeah, so just right there. Yeah. All right.
Okay, so let's push on. So this is there's 2 more slides here. What about Mercury? And we talked a lot about this, but this is applying. The reason why I like this moment as opposed to maybe the moon rising is that this was a way to empower Mercury and to raise it up, and to give Mercury that focus that it needs to have right on the midheaven. And different astrologers through time have, some might say this might be the most powerful planet in a way, being in a way being so close to the midheaven. Some schools would go that way. So even in spite of the essential dignity scheme, we still can empower our planet of astrology, Mercury, in the traditional planet of astrology, and we keep Cancer rising there. We keep that Cancer rising. So that's really all. You know, I think we've talked about everything on this slide. One other thing I will just noticing, the modern planet of astrology, Uranus in the 11th. That's kind of nice too. I just saw that the community that you're building here.
Yeah. Well, and I laugh because, you know, as someone like bringing it out, right? Like trying to bring this into this form, I laugh because Uranus is in Taurus and my son is just there. And I'm telling you, like the way that it shot in, I was like, oh my God, this has got to be Uranus, because I would never ever do this, at least not this way, you know? So to laugh about how this chart even was saying, hey, I need your attention. You know, it was like waiting to be seen in it. And then I'm just looking too, and my north node in Cancer sits at 16 degrees.
Wow.
Right? Like, all right, we're doing this. And it's interesting too, because when you're talking about those fixed stars I was reading, I was talking about the yellow binary light that sits in the mouth of the dog. My Chinese sign is the dog. You know, and it's just like, as this has been unfolding as well for our community, I don't know if anybody's had this experience, but like a project comes to you and it seems really big. And it's like, what am I supposed to do with that? You know, so it's very much so, while this academy has its own life and its own feel, I definitely feel a huge learning and like karmic connection to moving in sync with this chart and with what it's doing and trying to do and trying to work out. So it's absolutely fascinating when we just see it come together, you know.
Yeah, it's I'm in awe. That's seeing your placements, that this is hitting so many of your personal placements. That's a lovely thing too. Some electional astrologers will tell you that's all they want to do is align it with the personal placements of the client. And so I love to see that. And I didn't have your chart when I looked at this. So it's cool to see that it's just happening. This is astrology. Sometimes, you know, you can get an electional astrologer, you can do everything you can, but life will pull you. You know, like we were saying earlier, there's the fate of life is going to pull us where it wants us to be. So it's great to have that confirmation, and to see this. And It's lovely, it's lovely to see. I'm glad to just know more about this now after talking here today, because it makes me feel even more just connected to this chart, and I feel like it's even more appropriate for it's the chart. It's the best chart that we could find, I think. So
Yeah.
let me move to this next slide. Here's the two in Placidus and whole sign, if we want to just look at that for a second. The one thing with this is the 10th house. It's all the 10th house. So this brings Mercury and Neptune into that 10th house, which I think is important in a way, to have. It's nice to see that Mercury and Neptune coming into the 10th. We've already talked about them being there in Pisces, but that's cool to have the planet of astrology in the 10th. And what else happens here? Jupiter comes into the 9th house in Placidus. That's nice to have. The Jupiter would be that teaching planet in the 9th house of the house of teaching and higher knowledge and wisdom. So did you check this out in Placidus at all?
Yes. Placidus is like my go-to. And
Yeah.
either way, though, that it was kind of interesting looking at them both in Placidus and whole sign. I just felt like the story just like congealed together so perfectly in both forms. And I do have to tell you, that is not always my experience with whole sign, but I feel like this had a very specific story. So it was like whichever lens we were going to be able to look through it at, whether Placidus or whole sign, I feel like it all has these angles that points us back to just like one solid mission. So I was happy to look at it in either one, at this particular time, because I just feel like the story is pretty specific, regardless of which lens we see it through.
Wonderful. Yeah. And it goes back to the fate, like you're saying, if it's meant to be whatever lens, like you're saying, it's going to get that confirmation, whatever lens we choose to analyze it through, there will be the green lights there. So, and that's the beauty about having a planet on the midheaven, is that it brings it into the 10th house. And that's what it does here with Mercury. And, if we had waited earlier, let's say, tried to get the the 15th degree of Cancer rising to match the theme of Mundi, this Mercury would have been in the 9th in Placidus, and that's still a pretty strong house, but here it brings it into the highest point, the zenith. And so anyhow, we'll talk more about this in the courses. I'm sure people will learn about how systems work and how the divisions operate in terms of the angles and everything. So
Yeah.
but just a point to note there. Okay, well, this is it, Stormie. This is the slide. This is the last slide.
This is it. This is it. This is us. This is the thing. We're an Aries rising, a Cancer, or we are an Aries sun, a Cancer moon, and a Cancer rising, and holding North Node in Gemini, South Node in Sagittarius. So I think this project has pretty much just laid itself out, and we're on our way to fulfilling all of these placements. As we speak, the ball's rolling. But it's neat to see too, at an evolutionary level, that the soul of what this thing is trying to be, this is what it looks like on paper or computer. On computer paper. That's what we'll call it.
Yeah, it's brought into the 2D, and I guess with the internet, it's some other D. I guess going out the DD, the digital dimension. Yeah,
the digital dimension. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for, first of all, coming and joining us, but also being willing to cast the election and then walk through so we can all see how we got here, and also to see what we're working with and where we're going for the next year.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, you're very welcome. And it's just been a privilege and an honor, like I said, and I'm just so happy to be a part of this, and I cannot wait to get this up and running. And I'm so excited for the students. Everybody out there, you're going to have so many courses on an ongoing basis. People come to me all the time, how do I start? How do I learn? Well, this will be such a great way to do it, with a organized syllabus of courses that you can get in a rhythm with. I think that's what's so important. Every week you can have lessons and become the astrologer you want to become. So thank you, Stormie, and thank the community out there.
Absolutely. All right, you guys, we are going to wrap this particular video up, and we look forward to seeing you March 22nd when classes start. And we are going to actually be beginning our studies looking at not only how you can get your astrology chart and a nice introduction and all of that good stuff, but we're going to be coming in through the lens of understanding the astrology history. And we're also going to jump into the astronomy before we actually move into beginning to break down the language of astrology and what it looks like. So we will be spending a nice long year together, pulling together the basics. And even if you're studying just beyond the basics or you're a bit more advanced, I encourage you to join in and to watch as every new teacher presents information. There are juicy nuggets that I know that I can still go back and take from and bring to my own table. So watch, learn, enjoy, and we look forward to seeing you guys very soon here on March 22nd. Thanks again, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.